What's up?
What's up?
We're in life with your boy Pernell.
And your boy DJ Illinois. What it do for it,
Hi, what's up, dog?
What's up, man? What's good with it, man?
Oh, man, you know, I stay excited every time we put on a podcast. We got some new and exciting things going on.
We do, and it's always a blessing. It's always
It
good.
is.
And it's always positive.
It is.
That's the key.
Yeah.
What's our motto? In Life Podcast, where what?
Well, tell them.
Where
your opinion matters more
than ours.
Yeah.
You know what it is. Round of applause. Let's go.
Because we want everybody to have a voice because, you know, there's so many people out there with no voice, no way to get their business out there, no way. I mean,
A message.
it is ways to get out there, but it becomes so difficult and so frustrating for a lot of people because they don't have any real outlet to
A resource.
and it costs.
Yeah, that was another thing I was
It
going to bring up.
costs, dude.
Everything comes with, well, what do you have for a cost or how much? And not everybody is fortunate to be put in that position to have. So
90% of the world is not fortunate. You
No,
know,
not
that's
at
why
all.
so many people come together, you know, when they have great business-minded people
yes.
who come together, who, you know, me and you, for example.
We've been working for
Me
what,
and you,
about
for example.
6 months now? We
A
developed
little,
the podcast
a little
in the
less than
basement.
that, but can you imagine how much we didn't got completed in the 4 to 5 months that we
Yes.
have been, that we sat down and said, hey, let's do a podcast. And then it came to, all right, well, let's have a studio because we got all the equipment anyway from the podcast.
Yep.
And then it was like, well, my wife was a photographer, so I got all this stuff in my storage. Let's do videos. You know what I mean?
And let's put it together.
And we got the clothing line coming back out.
Yep.
So, you know, a lot has happened so fast. And it's like blessings on blessings on blessings. And it's like, what do we do to not hinder our blessings?
Keep going.
Keep going.
And along that journey, we I was blessed to meet somebody cool.
Yep.
A young man, you know, that I heard a lot of negativity about. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give that young man a chance. And I'm glad I did because he has a really good talent and passion for music. So I would like to introduce one of our guests today.
Okay,
G
you know-
Money.
Hey, what up?
Well, this is not even a guest, dude. He works with us.
Well, on the podcast.
Well,
we
okay.
never hear his
Yeah,
voice on the
yeah.
podcast.
Well, I had told him the last podcast when he was like, dude, I think I should just wait until, you know, my people come and, you know, I don't really. I said, look, you actually just, you know, you don't have to do a lot.
Nah,
but you
I
gotta
think
be
he's
there.
shy, but he's not shy on the mic. I've heard him rap.
Oh, of course.
I've
yeah.
heard him rap,
Yeah,
so he ain't
yeah.
shy on the mic,
Yeah.
man.
We know that. We know.
Yes.
And he ain't really shy in person either. 'cause
No, not at all. He's
we
got a
didn't-
big personality.
Yeah, we didn't, you know,
Yeah,
open them up.
So go ahead and introduce yourself, my man.
I'm G Money or Grant Bemrich, as a lot of people know.
Snaps.
You know, I don't have the best image around here, but I'd like to
We're working
change
on
that.
that.
Yeah,
working
I'd like to change that.
One thing about life. The lessons that you get as an adult and who you become is often designed by the mistakes that you have as a younger teen, as a young adult. We don't become, believe me, we're none of us are in the position we are in because we got squeaky clean records. Right?
Dropping bombs on
Right.
it.
So nobody, well, as far as us, you know, we came to a realization in life that it's better to help people than to, you know,
Hurt people.
Then even when you thinking like they're not up to standards or they're doing this, is, you know, everybody got their time frame when they become a better person.
Yeah, exactly. See, and I think that's what a lot of people don't really look at. They kind of just look at who you were in the past, and that's the image a lot of people just stick in their head because
that's what they got to actually judge you off of.
They
Like,
don't have anything new to judge me
right.
off of. They're
Right. But you know what? Life is about, okay, if you understand what you have done in the past and what type of image it placed on you, your family, the community, whatever, and you just say, okay, from this point on, everything that I do is going to have a positive outcome. You know, I'm not going to be with the same people doing the same thing.
Yeah, you got to switch it up or
because you know
nothing's
what
gonna
they
change.
say. You know, the definition of being insane is, you know,
Doing the same thing over and over.
right.
Yeah.
And that's where we find ourselves a lot of times is doing the same things over and over, expecting different outcomes, different outlets. Like, damn, it worked one time. You know,
Well, you got to keep changing.
and you got to
And-
keep changing.
Yeah.
The funny thing about change is it's always hard,
Right.
but you got to keep changing. And when you stop changing,
Right.
you've stopped.
Okay, now we're ahead of our time because y'all don't even know who's speaking.
Hey,
right
man,
now.
I was about to say, hey.
My mic's
Hey, I see him. Like, hey, let me get in there.
Okay, so we sparked the interest in him. Please
Yeah,
let
you
us
did.
know who you are.
Yes, please introduce yourself, sir.
I'm G Money's dad.
Okay.
Matt Bemrich.
Okay.
And, thank you. And I'm the mayor of Fort Dodge.
The mayor of Fort Dodge.
Yeah.
Don't you know we have so many questions to ask you?
Oh, well. You know, I've done a lot of not podcasts. I
Right.
think this is only the second podcast I've ever done.
Okay, well,
But I
we
used
at
to
the
do,
top.
yeah. I used to do a call-in radio show on an AM
Okay.
radio station here
Yeah.
locally.
I remember that.
And it was an hour a week, and people just call in and ask questions about
Right.
something going on in the community,
Right.
an issue they might have, and then the guy who ran the show, his name was Mike Devine.
Okay.
He was kind of a wild guy. He was all, you know, we'd start in this galaxy and finish in a different
So he
universe
pretty much like
completely.
us.
I don't know yet. I don't know.
You'll find out.
Yeah, but it was a lot of fun, and you know, it really, when I started, I was scared to do it. You know, I'm like,
Right.
God, what are people going to call and ask? And
Right.
you know, most of the time, if you just have a nice conversation with somebody, and like whether I knew the right answer
Yeah.
or maybe I didn't even know the answer,
Right.
you're just honest with them, and like, hey, you know, I got to look into that.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. Well, how our whole podcast is designed, like we'll do like a little background history on what you got going on and stuff, but we rather just let everything go freely, like, you know,
Yeah.
so you can just be comfortable with, even if we get questions that, you know, are kind of like controversial, you know.
Sure.
We feel like, you know, this is the place to even have those conversations.
Definitely.
So, just
Yeah,
so
I mean,
you
if
know,
you
know,
don't
you
want to
more
talk
than free
about
to speak
something,
on
there's
whatever.
usually a reason.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so where we going? I would like for our listeners to know, what positive changes you felt you've made in our community.
You know, so I've been the mayor. This is my 15th year.
Give them a round of applause because
Thanks.
I'm pretty sure it's not just an easy job to be a mayor.
It isn't. And a lot of times, you know, people don't understand maybe the authority of a mayor. So I don't.
Right.
It's not like, I mean, if a mayor isn't a dictator, I can't just
Right.
go, you're going to do this.
Right.
So you got to build consensus. You got to build first with your city council and the people that work for the city.
Relationships.
You got to build good
Yeah.
relationships, good rapport, lay out plans, and then you got to get community buy-in. You got to get the people out in the community to say, yeah, I think you're doing a good job. So I believe in the path you may have our community on, whether it be fixing infrastructure like bad streets or sewers backing up in people's basements or something like that.
Because Fort Dodge been having a lot of that.
Yeah.
They've been having well, I guess because, you know, you got to also think that a lot of these homes was built in early 19th centuries, I'm pretty sure.
A few years back, we actually got into planning. So on the southeast side of town, kind of over by like the Olson Park area,
Yep.
there was a lot of sewer backups.
Right.
So working with some consultants, our city staff, and the council, we developed a plan to fix that infrastructure. And it took about 5 or 6 years to do it. And it was millions and millions of dollars. But if we wanted those people's quality of life to be decent, I mean, it's got to start with there isn't sewage in my basement every time it rains outside.
Definitely.
Yep.
So, you know, those are the big lifts that happen and aren't really like sexy or nobody's like
You let me get
coming
down
to
that.
applaud, like,
Right.
oh, you're going to fix sewers.
Right.
But it's necessary and it has to happen.
Yeah.
And it's often difficult to do. You got to develop the plans. You got to inconvenience all these people by
Yep.
tearing up all these roads and streets over there. You got to put that new infrastructure in the ground. Then you got to connect everybody.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting because when I first got into office, I was a council member. So I was on the city council for 4 years, and now I've been mayor for 15. And that was a lot of the screaming you'd hear from the community is, I got sewage coming up in my basement every time it rains. So instead of the response previously, previous administrations, previous past councils, was, well, we don't have the money. And we didn't either, but we had to do that heavy lift and tell the community, hey, if we want to fix these things and we want to do something, we got to figure out how to pay for it. And we have to do that as a collective.
Right.
And that's tough to tell people. People want service, but often don't understand why they got to pay for it the way they got to pay for it.
Right.
Yep.
And what a lot of people don't understand is when you constructing a new area, the first thing that goes in is the sewer.
Sewer, water.
That's the first thing when you building any type of buildings or homes or
anything,
the first thing you got to put in is the sewer lines.
Sewer, plumbing,
the water and stuff,
gas,
so you can
electric.
Yeah.
Speaking of gas, man, what happened
up
down
the street?
Yeah. So that was a scary situation.
Man.
So there was a gas leak on 12th and about 1st North there, right up
the street from
up in that area.
Yeah.
There was a gas leak, and it started on Sunday, and Mid-American Energy, as well as the city, the fire department was there. They were trying to figure out where is it leaking because you could smell it. I mean, just being in the vicinity, even a block or so away, you could just get that odor, and we all know what that odor is.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
kind of like
strong
eggs, like old eggs or something in the fridge, something like that. It stinks.
Right.
So you could smell it. So they started shutting power off. I think there was an apartment complex that maybe had like 30 people in it they didn't have any power. The people that are in that strip on 12th, I think a lot of them didn't have power. They had the gas isolated. They finally got it off. But it had backed up into a building, enough gas, and all it takes is a spark.
I was about to say,
explosion.
What a lot of people don't understand is that gas is methane gas. The eggs that you smell,
natural gas. Yeah.
And like you said, it will blow up.
And it did, and there was an explosion and a small fire. Luckily, of course, because it was a gas leak, we had fire right on scene, so they were able to isolate the damage from the fire, but there was still an explosion.
Right.
So I've actually met with Mid-American since then via phone, and through that whole leak, I was talking to them.
Right.
And we're going to have a meeting now in a couple of weeks and get together and talk about what worked, what didn't work, how can we respond better if we ever have another leak like that, because this creates it's a bad event, but it creates an opportunity to learn from it.
Right. And it also create job opportunities as well.
Well, sure. I mean, we got to maintain infrastructure as a community, as a city, but then you have somebody like a partner like Mid-American Energy that has our gas and electric utility, and they're investing in their utility as well, and that infrastructure. It sounds like, I don't know exactly because they're still investigating what happened there, but it sounds like there might have been an old service lateral to a building that had been torn down years ago, and that was where the leak was. Now they got to figure out, why did it leak? Was it the infrastructure failed because of age?
Right.
Was it a natural event, the ground shifting, something like that? So,
and it could be a little bit of all of that because, just from time and erosion in the ground underneath and old pipes.
And we've been putting in new fiber optics around the community. So that we've disrupted underneath all these roads all over the city. So, your directional boring companies and your trenching companies are going around putting in all that infrastructure. Could it be related to that? Could some of that infrastructure that was installed be related to why that gas line leaked? We don't know, and that's why they'll investigate and figure that out.
Another question I feel the community has is the violence with the youth. I know that's on a lot of people's hearts and minds, and everybody, has been affected by that.
Definitely.
What do you feel is the solution? Do we have a solution? Is there a solution?
Well, I'm not going to tell you I have a solution
Of
because
course.
as an individual, I definitely, if I had it, I would have already done it,
Right.
And I think that's kind of the tough thing to get across to people is if we had a way to stop that kind of violence from happening, we would have already done that. So I think it's investing in the community first. We need law enforcement, of course. You got to make sure they're well funded and they can do their job because they're reacting to crime.
Right.
They don't have enough time currently to be proactive to crime and getting out into the community. That's why the city right now is trying to add 8 officers because then they're going to have
I heard that, yeah.
more school resource officers. They're going to have more of community presence officers. That job is not just simply to react to every crime, but
Right.
be more up on investigations, be more active in the community in a social way so that we are connecting to people
I
in
was
the
about to
community
say that-
versus just coming to react to a
Yeah,
crime.
because I was actually about to comment on that because I feel like just as important as it is to have those people in the right positions in the right places, I think it's just as important to get in tune with the community,
Yep.
with the actual
Right.
people who are
Relationship,
living,
yeah.
who are we supposed to serve and protect, and ask them, what can we do to help you in your community, and have something, organizations or something where we can give back to them people, where they can see for themselves that there's actual caring about what's going on in the community.
Right. And our current police chief, he's pretty new. His name's Dennis Quinn. Great guy, and he has been more out in the community.
Right.
He's gone around and explained why he believes these 8 officers are going to make a better impact
Right.
on the law enforcement side.
Right.
And he's also talking about the quality of life here.
Right.
The first thing people want when they move somewhere is to be safe, right?
Right. Of course.
You want a safe community.
That's
Right.
not what I hear when I leave here. I say I'm from Fort Dodge. You're like,
Ooh, dirty dog.
Dirty Dodge.
Dirty Dodge.
Dude, I hate that term. I absolutely hate it.
Listen, but this is
Because if you live here and you know people,
Yeah.
it's not that.
it's not dirty.
No.
not by any means.
It isn't. It's
We
a
get
great
stereotyped
community.
that so bad.
It is a stereotype.
Here's the whole ideal of where Dirty Dodge came from. It's not that the town itself is dirty, is that the people in the town be doing scandalous shit. So
Yeah, true that, dude. True that.
dirty
You know,
about
every town has scandalous people, man. I don't care if there's 80 people in the town or
Right.
800,000.
But why do we get stereotyped
Right.
so bad for
Well,
it? though?
I think it might be just because it rolls off the tongue super easy. to say.
Yeah, honestly,
dirty
yeah,
really
it does
a
roll
saying
off the
for
tongue.
Dodge
And I
before.
hate it, but
Before you was even married, Dirty Dodge was already.
I grew up here. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I'm 50 years old.
Yeah.
I've heard that for 50 years.
Yeah.
Damn, it's been like that for 50.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Damn.
you got to remember, this was a very, in the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s, it was a very blue collar, hardworking family type community. And they were known to be really tough people here.
Right.
I mean, we've always had great wrestling
Right.
here.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know
Yep.
about the wrestlers that
Right,
come out of
right.
here.
Yep.
So people are just naturally think Fort Dodge is
Corn-fed.
tough.
Yeah.
Everybody there is tough.
Yeah.
You don't meet a guy on the street in Fort Dodge, Iowa that isn't
Yeah. They ain't tough.
tough.
Yeah. You can hold it up.
That's kind of was the mentality.
Stereotype, yeah.
And you had the industries here were packing, so you had multiple packing plants, you had heavy manufacturing type jobs, and those guys were strong men. I mean, they were carrying sides of beef through the packing plants. I mean, they were doing it the old school way before everything became automated and robots and all this stuff. I mean, these guys were getting out big knives and they're chopping
But
that
you know
stuff
what?
up and they're carrying that beef around. So people had a mentality, I think had an image of Fort Dodge that everybody there is just a tough guy. Is that broken? No, it's carried. And, images carry generationally through
Yep.
a thing like
Yep.
a community. They may
Yep.
not always carry through a family, but in a community they
Right.
will.
Right.
So I think we got a bad rap on the whole dirty job.
Well,
you guys have got me to say dirty Dodge more than I think I've said it in 10 years, man. Because I hate it.
It's not. It's, you know what? And we was we so controversial on this platform, and we was talking about, you know, no offense, but we was talking about the word nigga and how controversial, you know, maybe our listeners might not like it, or, you know, I tell my guy to tone it down all the time, you know. He's the bad one, and it's really just the things that people say don't necessarily have to always leave a negative stench. Like, you know, people actually
I kind of
go,
like the comparison
yeah,
like that.
people actually go to other states, and when they hear people say "Dirty Dodge," it's like a
You from Fort Dodge,
yeah,
huh?
You know
Yeah.
where I'm from.
And, you know, Fort Dodge,
You know
even-
where I'm from.
So if you go out north and west of town, you have Fort Dodge Labs, which is now called Elanco. But there was this little oval that said Fort Dodge in it, red logo, that was on every vet bottle that you would have seen all over the world. Almost every continent said Fort Dodge on it, because that was where they developed certain kinds of animal vaccinations.
Decker's like that now.
Yeah, Decker.
I see Decker's truck.
Fort Dodge
So-
worldwide,
Dodge.
baby.
You know, I like to. You've all heard the, 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Oh,
You
yeah.
ever heard
Yeah.
about
Oh,
that?
yeah.
So everybody in Hollywood's connected to Kevin Bacon by
Right.
like 3 steps or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
I always like to, because I've traveled a lot in my life, luckily. I like to say you're usually only like 3 or 4 degrees separated from Fort Dodge. I mean, I've sat in like an airport bar waiting for a plane and started a conversation with somebody
Right.
and said where I was from. And they were like, "Oh, my uncle used to work for a pharmaceutical company that
Right,
sold Fort
right.
Dodge products."
Yeah.
Or my aunt married a guy from there, or whatever. It's really weird how connected Fort Dodge is to a lot of things,
Because
bigger
we in
than
the
Fort
middle
Dodge's
of the map.
community.
And
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah, middle of nowhere.
Middle of Iowa.
Just because we're in the middle
But
of nowhere, but
you-
everything flocks to us from
But
outside.
interesting enough is sometimes we have that attitude that we're in the middle of nowhere, and I like to think that we're in the middle of everything
We are.
instead
And
of
that's
being in
how
the
I
middle
look
of
at it.
nowhere.
Yeah.
Nice.
If you think about transportation, agriculture, all the different things, we have a lot here.
Speaking of
We don't
transportation,
celebrate it enough. Is probably our problem.
we have the airport that goes to Chicago.
Yeah.
Do we still have the Greyhound? I know back in the day when
You
I
got to
was
thought it
in
was
college-
a dart
to
bus.
catch a Greyhound. You get on a dart, and I
Yeah.
believe you go over to
Is it
the
Boone's?
truck stops. At,
Okay.
In
at
Boone's, yeah.
Boondocks.
Do we have
I've
any
been on that
plans
before.
in the near future for any railroad possibilities at all?
We don't have any rail that I think is considered passenger rail.
Okay.
All of our rail is more heavy industrial rail, so
Okay.
it's moving corn products, different things like
You
that.
have to
Yeah.
actually go to Osceola if you want to catch
If you wanna catch a train.
like the
Yeah.
Amtrak.
Yeah.
and
But still,
stuff like
having
that.
the airport is a big thing
Yeah,
for
that's
this
a
small
very-
community. You know what I'm
Absolutely.
saying? Definitely.
And Grant
Yeah.
and his brothers and Michelle and I all went to Mexico on a trip. Was that two winters ago?
Yeah,
2 years ago, about now.
2021.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was right after the COVID thing. And we flew out of Fort Dodge.
It's
It was-
10 times
it was
cheaper to
great.
fly out of Fort
And
It was
Dodge.
awesome.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's
We flew right
so
back in, too.
convenient
Yeah.
to not have to drive to Des Moines.
Man,
a
Des Moines
whole
be hitting you upside the head
hour
for
and
the
a
damn
half or
tickets.
whatever it
Yeah.
takes to get there, and you can just go right up the street. I mean, it's very small commercial planes, so people that are like
I don't like
claustrophobic-
that little plane, man.
Yeah.
I
The
don't-
little jet. They're just
Nah,
little.
man, I'm like,
it is
dude,
RJs.
Jesus.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I did
I
feel
don't want to be like Buddy Holly.
Yeah, I felt
Yeah.
claustrophobic
Yeah.
on that little
I've
plane.
flown in a lot of different commercial flights, as well as some people that I know that have smaller planes and
private
stuff.
planes.
And it's fun to do,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're right. If you don't have the stomach for flying, you don't want to jump in a little plane.
Nah, not at all.
We used to have a small company here. I'm trying to think, Air Choice One,
I remember that.
and they flew to St. Louis
Yeah.
and Chicago.
Yeah.
And I loved that we went to St. Louis because
We don't go to St. Louis no more?
No, we don't. Air Choice One did, but our new connection with our partner through United,
Yes.
it just goes to Chicago. We were going to Denver for a little
Yeah,
bit.
that's what I was
And-
loving
and that
because
was
I'm
awesome.
from Denver.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I thought that was awesome. But, with just not having enough pilots seems to be a lot of the conversation when you look into commercial aviation. They're retiring pilots so fast, and more people aren't getting into it, So, I mean, if you like aviation, get into flying planes.
I always wanted to be a pilot, though. That's what I
just
thought.
do music.
I was going,
You got enough going on.
As a kid, I was gonna go to. That was my whole thing. Was I was gonna go to the military just to be a pilot.
Try to be a pilot,
and then I was convinced that the military ain't the place for black people. so I was like, okay,
I don't know about that.
Do something different.
Speaking of, with you being a mayor, did you always want to be a mayor? Like, what inspired you to be a mayor?
Let me tell you the 2-minute elevator version of this story, because it's kind of a long story. I was about 27, 28 years old, and my family owns a business here, Bemrich Electric. We're an electrical contractor.
Y'all do great work.
And that was my dad's company after my grandpa's company. My grandpa started it, my dad joined, my uncle, I joined. My dad's now retired. My grandpa passed away in 1996. But I was about 27 or 28, and I got a job offer to move to another state to help build an automotive plant. And this contractor was recruiting me to go do that, and he was going to pay me pretty well, relocate me and our family and stuff. And I went into my dad's office. I said, hey, I think I'm going to take this opportunity. And he goes, now, why would you do that? I mean, don't you want to own this someday? And I said, well, Dad, it seems like Fort Dodge is kind of just stagnant. There's nothing going on here, and the pie is shrinking in the market. That means the market's shrinking.
And what year was this?
This would have been early 2000s.
Okay.
And I said, I don't want to fight over a shrinking pie.
Right.
I want to go somewhere where there's growth, there's opportunity for me, my family. And he said, well, do something about it. Instead of leaving, why don't you stay here, use your time and talent to
so
do
your
that.
dad convinced
So
you
my
to be the
dad,
mayor.
no, actually, he said, go get involved. I don't think he ever thought
He
I was
didn't
going
know
to take
you
it to that level. So I went out and got involved and just started volunteering to do things. So I helped create a young professionals group in the community.
Yeah.
Got involved in Leadership Fort Dodge, which Leadership Fort Dodge is through like our chamber group, the Growth Alliance. And that's like exposes you to all kinds of different things that go on in our community that unless you're entrenched in it, you're not going to know about.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a cool program. And then we changed the form of government. Now, that was when I got really excited. So we had a strong mayor form of government. That strong mayor every 4 years would get a new one, and he'd throw out everything the previous guy was doing,
Right.
fire people, hire new people,
Right.
and we'd start all over. So there was no continuity in government.
Yeah.
There was no continuity, and without continuity, government's really not going to function well.
Right.
I mean, look at what we got now.
Yeah.
What are you? Are you a Republican or a Democrat?
I'm a Democrat,
So
registered
we can
as
talk
a
about
Democrat.
Trump.
Yeah, I'm not a Trump guy. I am not a Trump guy. And I'm not really a Joe Biden guy either, to tell you the truth. I mean, I think back to Brewster's Millions, none of the above right now.
Agreed.
I'm not
Hell
on
yeah.
board with either of these guys, and
Me
I
either.
really think our country's broken. But to the point,
That's another podcast.
See, this is-
That's another
I'm
podcast.
so
That's a whole nother can
I'm
of
so
worms.
glad that you came to this podcast because it's so many like we need to talk about so much in the world, and it's like nobody want to talk about what's going on.
some of
for
those
real.
tough things, sure.
Yeah, and we need that outlet in Fort Dodge. It's called awareness for us.
So we changed the form of government here because of the kinds of things that I think we're seeing in government sometimes to create continuity.
Right.
We hired a professional city manager, let him run the day-to-day operations. We give him a budget, go do the things we try to get, we plan to do. So we changed the form of government. They had changed the form of government in the early 80s from what was called a commission form to the strong mayor form, thinking that was going to help things continue on, and they weren't. So we changed the form of government. The community voted, changed the form, and somebody came to me and said, you know what, you should really run for city council, make sure they actually change the form of government, implement this the way that it was envisioned.
Mm-hmm.
So I ran for city council. 4 years go by, I really got into it, and the mayor at that time was a brand new mayor right when we changed the form of government. He says, well, I'm moving. I'm going to Des Moines, and his company was evolving and changing. He had some responsibilities he needed to move there for. So he says, you should run. So I did, and I've been the mayor ever since. So,
Good.
I mean, that's kind of a shorter version.
Hell yeah.
So, changing that form of government, I think, was something Fort Dodge did for itself as a community.
Right.
I'm not taking credit for that. I think the community deserves the
evolved.
credit for
Yeah.
that. And that allowed the elected people to focus more on planning.
Right.
So let's create a vision for our community. Let's break that vision down into strategic plans, whether they be like a 3-year or 5-year, then break that down into budgeting and capital improvements.
Right.
And then you start seeing continuity, consistency, reaction to things in a more concise way versus we don't have the money.
Right.
Or
That's
we
not
don't
a
know
good
how
answer.
to do it.
Yeah.
Because that isn't
Nobody
what
wants to hear that.
We
Right.
don't want to hear it. I mean, we don't want to feel the pain of government, but we also
The reality of
have
government.
to understand that government can be a good facilitator of things.
Yeah.
We can help connect employers to employees. We can connect industry to opportunity to expand their markets or expand what they're doing. And I really look at my role as being a person to help make sure that happens.
Right.
Are these people talking to each other? Are they collaborating?
Right.
Are they creating barriers?
Right.
The city and the county used to never even speak to each other. We have meetings every other week
And
on
see,
Friday
and
morning.
all
I
that
just came from
division-
that meeting.
All that division is probably what kept the whole thing stagnating when you was talking to your
Absolutely.
father in the beginning and you was realizing and seeing that the pie was being ate up from just the one few people on the inside instead
Sure.
of,
Everybody getting a piece.
getting a
Like they
piece.
we
say.
we
Yeah.
kind of had a mentality of build a fence around it and then let's just gobble it all up.
That's Donald
Right.
Trump's
Versus-
mentality.
I may that is ironic. Yes. So it's interesting. Once we took down those barriers and people started working together and realizing that we can celebrate success together, but
Right.
then we have to accept our failures together
Right.
too.
Right.
And we don't blame it on one. We own it. And we go
Take it.
and try
Yeah,
to come up
yeah.
with corrective
Yeah.
action or make a shift,
mhm.
make a change. And that goes to the point you talked about a lot earlier about evolving and changing.
Right.
Because once you aren't changing anymore, you've just stopped.
You just
There's
stop,
nothing
yeah.
worse than stopping.
Right.
Because when you
right.
stop,
Or giving
nothing
up.
happens.
Or
Yeah.
giving up.
If you stop, nothing's going to happen.
Right.
So you got to accept that sometimes you got to change, and that change could be
Well, one
difficult.
thing
It could be
I
easy. It
know
could be
in life,
beneficial.
change is going to always come.
Yeah.
Whether it's a positive change or a negative change, it's always going to be change in life. It's always a season. It's always, the tide away. It rolls in and it goes back out. So with change, is just what positive. See, we want to have this platform where we can have all small business come on, talk about your company, and see what we could do for the community as business owners, where we can help some of these kids that, are a little misfortune or even get with the mayor and see what they
We can
got
do.
going on there. Maybe programs that you was talking about that
Sure.
we can get involved in, that we can make a positive change in that type of manner.
Yeah, and I was telling DJ Illinois before I think
Yes,
before
sir.
we started, Jefferson Fossbender is a local musician, but he's also our economic development guy
Right.
at the Greater Fort Dodge Growth Alliance. And I said, God, he'd be a great person just for you to meet, even if you don't do a podcast with him. But here's a guy that's trying to help local business grow, get new businesses
Right.
to our community, and he's really into entrepreneurial people and what can help them
Yeah.
go from an idea to an actual success story. So I think he'd be a fun person for you guys to just meet, but then also he might be fun to have on here. I mean, the guy's pretty talented too.
Well,
as
we
a
want
musician.
whoever
We
we,
want
can
everybody.
get.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
also involved with Chuck Clayton at APHIS as well. So we,
I know Charles very, very well.
yeah, we
Done
do a lot of stuff with
over the
him.
years.
So APHIS, what's up? We give shout
Definitely,
out to APHIS all
definitely.
the time as much as we can. Because thank you, Charles.
Definitely,
thank
thank you.
you. You own not only my one of my favorite cousins. You're also a great friend and a great business partner with me, and I'm so proud of you for what you do for the community. I don't know if people even like to give them a round of applause, please, because
Definitely.
we're gonna give all our flowers out here to everybody that we can. Because you got to be, like you say, you got to take the good with the bad, but you got to also know how to celebrate each one.
Right. And Charles started with an idea of he just wanted to give kids something better to do.
And the same thing.
And it's
yeah.
evolved and evolved.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been working on things like re-entry programs for people getting out of prison. Like, how do they reacclimate themselves to the community?
Yep.
Whether they're from this community or another, what do they do? How do they transition? And the whole idea is we don't want people to
be
reinstitutionalized, reoffend. But often that happens because people are stuck right back in the reality that put them there originally.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, coming up with different ways to do things like that. And I know Charles, and there's a lot of other people that are working on those things too. But Charles really, really reaches out in a different way. I think
he does.
I mean, his mission is always to, what can I do next to help somebody?
Right.
And he's always doing that stuff. So we have a community empowerment group that meets, I think, a couple times a month. It's on Fridays. Actually, I think it's today at 11:30. So there's a Zoom call that I try to get on as often as I can, and we talk about what's going on in our community, how do we change mindsets, culture to make our community a better place and create equality across the board. Okay. Charles and I can't think of his name. What's his name? We have a yearly meeting where all employees of the city go, and Charles and Dr. Eddie, what's his last name? I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Dr. Eddie, we'll find you. We will find